My favorite cartoon that I grew up watching when I was a kid was Beavis and Butthead. If you want to ask me which one was my favorite, Beavis. Beavis was always the funniest one. Next one, Doug Funny. I grew up watching Doug on Nickelodeon when I was a kid, though. Doug, Skeeter, Roger, Doug Funny's secret admirer that he had a crush on, his girlfriend. I grew up watching Doug as a kid. Pretty decent show, by the way. I don't really hear nothing from Doug no more, though, but that's a show that I grew up watching when I was a kid as well, too. Popeye the Sailor Man. Also grew up watching when I was a kid, though. Popeye is the reason why I started eating collard greens. Because, when I was a kid, I thought collard greens and spinach was the same, but they're not the same, though. But, yeah, I grew up watching Popeye, man. Popeye the Sailor Man always whooping Bluto's ass. Always love it, though. Popeye squeeze that can and eat it. Muscle gets big and start beating Bluto up. The Rugrats. I've always liked the Rugrats, but I like the original version of the Rugrats, though, because I remember Tommy had a little baby brother. Tommy's little brother was annoying, though. Tommy's brother was annoying. I like the original Rugrats when Tommy's brother was not born, but, Chucky, Phil Lil, Angelica. Angelica was pretty much annoying. She was pretty much the bully in the Rugrats, but it was a pretty decent show when I was a kid, when I watched on Nickelodeon back in the day. The Inspector Gadget. I always watched the Inspector Gadget when I come home from school back in the day when I was in elementary. That was also a pretty decent show. Go Gadget this, go Gadget that. How can you forget that? The Inspector Gadget. I grew up watching DuckTales. When I was a kid, I used to love watching the DuckTales, though. They even had DuckTales on Super Nintendo back in the days, too, when I was a kid. So I also played DuckTales on Super Nintendo, though, which was a pretty great game back in the days, though. But DuckTales was a decent cartoon that I liked. And the last cartoon is... And the last one is Droopy, though. I definitely like Droopy, though. And it's sad, though, that Droopy doesn't really be acknowledged like that. But Droopy was pretty funny, though. He'd be like, you know what? You cheated. Droopy was pretty funny, though, man. But it's pretty sad that Droopy doesn't get the same credit like Bugs Bunny and all them get. He doesn't get the same credit like Daffy Duck and Bugs Bunny, Porky Pig. He doesn't get the same credit like they do, though, because I feel like Droopy should be up there along with Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck on one of the funniest cartoon characters of all times, though. So I grew up watching Droopy. But that's pretty much it, though, people. I could have came up with more cartoons, but I felt like that was enough right there, though. I mean, I could have named a whole lot more. But, yeah, I grew up watching these cartoons back in the days, man. Them cartoons back in the days was the shit back then. But cartoons now, garbage, man. If you weren't around in the 90s and 80s, you missed out. The 90s cartoons was off the chains, man. But cartoons right now, like cartoons like SpongeBob and all that garbage stuff on Nickelodeon, man, it's nothing, man. It doesn't measure up to the cartoons back in the 90s. Cartoons back in the 90s was the shit back in the day, man. You had your Beavis and Butthead back in the days, cursing, all that stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? You had cartoons like that back in the days, man, but cartoons nowadays just garbage, man. Garbage. These cartoons today can't compare to the cartoons back in the 90s. If anybody disagree with me, then you know what? You're crazy. If you think today's cartoon is better than the 90s cartoons, you must either be crazy or you must be cracked or you just someone who just wasn't around that timeline. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say, y'all. Peace.